Hey guys, I've been wondering for a while, how can I get my ZBrush layers when I'm working on a head, specifically when I'm sculpting tertiary details on a head? How can I get all these layers out of ZBrush, especially when I have a head that's like up to like 50 million points as I do right now? How do I get all that data, all these layers out of ZBrush and into something like Substance Painter in a way that is relatively efficient and pain-free, so that I can continue to tweak the intensity of my layers, perhaps continue to mask out where certain details are applied, and also generate a whole bunch of other cool effects in the process there. I've been wondering for the longest time, how can I actually accomplish that? And I figured out a solution for this, and you'll see it's really simple, it's great, it works wonderfully, and it is my pleasure to finally be able to share this with you guys. Starting next week, we will start to go through the whole pipeline, the whole character art creation pipeline from A to Z, and that's pretty much what will occupy us until we get all the way to summer break there. So that will be probably at least 8 weeks, maybe even 10 weeks or so. I'm even now struggling to with the amount of content. I have to cut out some things, but there's some things I didn't want to cut out, so I'm like, oh, I should try to put that back in there. So we'll see how the schedule goes. I also want to have summer break here at Outgang conveniently sync up with when I will actually be free to go out because of COVID, and still have to wait like 4 months until I get my second shot because of supply here in Canada there. So hopefully I can get vaccinated sometime once more before summer there. The idea is that pretty much the whole topic from here, from next week until summer break, will all be about the character art creation pipeline, and we'll go through pretty much all of the steps, all the different buckets, if you will, that constitute the pipeline itself. We will talk about pretty much every step, what's easy, what's hard about them, what are the kind of things I want to pay attention to, how much time it takes, what tools do we have at our disposal, how do we do those steps properly. So there's a lot to talk about every time. Of course, it's not going to be just theory. We'll also look at the tools, of course, why you're using these tools, or how to use these tools, or how even can we define a proper result as the result of these tools, so that you also kind of know what to do if you're using a different tool. I know there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to even things like low-res creation, like what's a proper low-res? Should everything be quadded? Should everything be triangulated? You know, is it fine to cut across edge loops on the low-res if we want to support the silhouette of a fold somewhere? So the answer is yes, but you know, like all of these things, they're not always necessarily very intuitive, especially when it comes to low-res creation there. So there's a lot to unpack, and I'm quite excited to get started with that. And so that will be starting next week. I don't know what time it will be exactly, and I'm not even sure what day we are today, to be honest. I think we're still in May, right? We are in May, guys. Yeah? Yeah, we are.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Cool. What?
23rd.
23rd? Okay, so that would be 30th, I think. Next Sunday would be 30th is when we'll start the character art for video game pipeline there. So yeah, cool. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's 18. There's literally 20 people here, so cool. It's great to see the community grow. So at this point, we're almost like a militia there, but hopefully we'll grow as an army at some point. How can I get all my layers from ZBrush when I have so many layers like these, because I've been sculpting all my tertiary details on different layers, as you guys can see. I've done quite a lot of improvements on this. I've also subdivided this up to 50 million so that I can get just another subdivision level, because I was unhappy with the resolution of some of these details. So this is my painter scene with my updated albedo there for the head. And if I go in here, right, so if I just rotate this around, you guys can see the skin pores here. And actually, if I go to my height here, I now have a height folder in here. I actually have all my detail layers in here, and I can say, yeah, well, maybe those skin pores there. So these are these large pores. Yeah, maybe I don't quite like the intensity that they have right now. Maybe I want to lower the intensity of these. And so I have this whole layer that's been completely separated out. Now I have more than one layer with skin pores. So I have also these small pores here, which is also a ZBrush layer, and I can also turn that off, as you can see. And now that's pretty much it. I don't have any more skin pores there. So it's super nice, super easy to tweak things as we go. And that becomes very important once you get to Unreal, because we likely will want to boost the value of the intensity of some of these details. So how did I accomplish this magic trick? And it's actually very fast too to do. It's extremely fast, and like this is just magic, really. How I got all these details in here is that I've pretty much used Zbrush's displacement map baker here. And I realized that the displacement map baker, this is something that's been under the radar for me for like forever. Like I've baked normal maps in Zbrush back in the day, back in Zbrush 2, and that was kind of the way to do things. I've used that. I've never really used displacement map baker too much. So it's been kind of under the radar, but it's a great tool. It works wonderfully. I know it's been there for like a while, so it may be on like everyone's workflow, or that may already be within everyone's workflow, and I'm just slow to catch up on there. But you know, there's some of these things sometimes that about software, but especially about Zbrush 2, where there's so much stuff in here that at some point we just completely disregard some of these things. We're like, yeah, I don't care. It's like like I've seen it so much that now it just becomes just part of the furniture, so to speak, and we kind of like don't even bother to like look at these things that have been there for a long time there. But the displacement map baker, it works really well. It works great, and it gives awesome results. And in fact, it actually gives you even better bakes for your base normal map, even if you don't do this whole layer separation that we're about to do. Just baking normal maps now, if you bake it from a displacement map within Painter there, you'll actually get a crisper result out of your data there. You will actually get a better result. And I want to show this to you guys actually right now, just to really nail the point home that this is a really powerful thing that a lot of people should actually use. Let me show you guys results here of baking with the displacement map option. So both bakes that I'll show you guys have been baked within Painter, okay? Because in one case, I've simply exported the high res out of Zbrush as a standard OBJ, and in the other case, I've baked the displacement map out of Zbrush within Painter there. So both the final normal map baking has happened within Painter there. Okay, so first of all, our high-res projection bake, okay? Because it is projected, of course, we already have issues that are very standard of parts that interpenetrate. But if you guys take a look at the Zbrush, the normal map that was baked from the Zbrush displacement map, there's no issues. There's no problems here, there's no problems there. There's not even any problems around the eyes. Look at how clean this whole data is around the eyes there. Like, it's crazy how good this is. First of all, so that's the first key thing that we can kind of spot here. So first of all, we don't have these interpenetration problems. Second of all, okay, and this for me is actually the more critical one, because that one you can't really fix any other way. Take a look at the precision of the data, okay? So this is like super high res right now. This is our Zbrush displacement bake. It's super nice, super sharp. The details are very crisp, right? And this is our high-res projection bake. And let me just do a back and forth. And we can see, if I start to zoom in on here, let me zoom in even more, right? Let's take a look at, I don't know, like this zone here, right? This is my Zbrush displacement bake. This was my projection bake, right? This looks all kind of little muddy, little like kind of like almost blurred or like smudged a little bit. And there's these kind of problems kind of everywhere, this kind of little smudging that kind of happens. You know, if we take a look at this here again, right? Like, look at the beautiful noise that's been captured here in our Zbrush displacement bake. Look at how nice and sharp and crisp all these details are. And once I show you the high-res projection bake, see, like, we kind of lose all of that. It looks kind of stretched, all kind of muddy, these sorts of things. Sure, I'm like zoomed in here really, really close, but ultimately, like, you know, if you're going to spend your time sculpting some really high-res data within Zbrush, you want to make sure that all that data carries through as closely as it possibly can after baking, right? You don't want to just have the impression that you just apply whole blurred over your surface there after the fact. And that's kind of what happens, because like the sharpness that we get here is because the data isn't projected within Painter, crucially. our height map is actually simply converted to a normal map by the software. So there's never any projection that kind of happens, which is why we have data that is as crisp as it is. But the drawback of that is that because there's no projection, there will, in certain cases, if you guys take a look at these kind of wrinkles here, these are deeper wrinkles within the skin there. You guys can see that on the projected bake, I actually have something here that's probably closer to what I would expect than on the displacement bake. And the reason for that is because why that is happening is because over these wrinkles, I have used a bit of pinching there. I've used a pinching brush, which I believe was actually that probably would have only been dam standard, I believe, but dam standard does have a slight amount of pitching in there. And because our data is not projected, it means that if there is pinching over the surface, you guys can see just the fact that I have a few edge loops here that are running vertically across that are closer together there. Because there is pinching, and because this is not baked using projection, that pinching is not factored into the bake. So there is that drawback that we can deal with, though, but that is good to know as a limitation. It's the only drawback I was able to find about this particular approach, but it's worth to mention it there. If you use a lot of pinching in your brush set, if you do rely on a lot of pinching brushes, this will impact your data. Anyway, okay, cool. So what's happening then? Okay, so enough talking about the results there. How do we actually make this happen there? And it's actually very, very simple. It's so simple. It's so stupidly simple, guys. It is so simple. I can't believe I've never done this before and that I've only discovered this only recently, but it's my pleasure to share this with you guys. How do we do this? Super simple, guys. We take our mesh. We say, okay, so I want to bake the full 50 million polygons out, the full 50 million mesh. And maybe in Painter, I want to have a mesh that will be at about, let's say I want to bake it out at about 50,000 triangle mesh or 50,000 point mesh. Maybe this is my low res. I could go lower. There's no reason this will work just as well if you're at a lower subdivision, but you know, because this will eventually be a portfolio piece and these sorts of things, we usually, you know, go a bit higher in terms of resolution there. And look at how easy it is to just get the data out of this, okay? We just go in here and we say, well, in this case here, first of all, do turn this button off, okay? Or rather, this will be turned on by default. In fact, by default, your settings will look something like this. I believe these are your default settings for your displacement map within Zbrush there. So we do have to tweak these a little bit, okay? And let me just run through the import ones since we're here. So the smooth UV button will essentially apply a smoothness to your UVs, which if you've never really seen what it does, it just takes your UVs and just does like the equivalent of a mesh smooth to them as you go through the subdivision levels. I don't necessarily always like that because that does screw up the UVs from time to time, but it's okay if you're using that. It's not necessarily like a hard no. But the only thing that's important about this that you need to know right now, okay, is that this button needs to match the same button if you go up in your geometry palette, needs to match this button here, okay? Like you need to have the same one turned on in both cases. Because this is whether there's a smoothing that happens to your UVs as you subdivide your mesh and go up and down the subdivision levels in ZBrush. I like to turn it off because it usually screws up my UVs more than it makes them better. So I think it's turned off by default now because it's been a while since I had to turn this off. But every time I see this turned on, I turn it off because I really hate this feature. But yeah, so just make sure that you have the same value. If this is turned on, then this also needs to be turned on and so on and so forth there. So I'll turn it off because I don't like smooth UVs. Flip V because we know that textures are always exported with the V channel flipped from ZBrush. So this conveniently puts them upright, so you don't have to do that in Photoshop afterward. And finally, and this is the most critical part of all of this, your data needs to be exported as 32-bit because if you don't, then you'll get a nice 8-bit texture and like you can forget about the height map then. It's gonna be garbage. But this will export a lossless data set. So this has to be turned on for pretty much everything to work properly there. Now, one thing perhaps worth to mention before we do move on, okay? One thing that you may have as a question right now is, okay, but so how does it know what texture resolution to export out? You know, because you guys could see that I have 8K data here, but you're like, so does it just always export 8K data? Is that how it works? It's like, no, it does not always export 8K data. You have to actually set that somewhere. So that is important to know, okay? Like, because here there's no resolution slider in here. But it doesn't mean that you don't have control over that. The resolution of your displacement map is actually generated, or rather derived from when you go to UV map here, this little value here that I've conveniently cranked up as high as it possibly will go here. So this by default is, I don't know what's the default, but it's not 8K for sure. And so you go to UV map and you can crank this up all the way to 8K if you want to export 8K data out of this. That's pretty much it, guys. So okay, so we're at the 50,000 polygon or point mark here. Our mesh has 50 million polygon, just to remind that. And so let's see how much time it takes to export this out. So let's go here. Let's do displace test. Let's write this down. Displace test. Okay, let's go in here. Let's say, so this is our, let's say full details, because all our layers are turned on, right? Let's do save. And let's see here. Oh, okay, it's doing something. It's doing something. It's doing something. So how long will this take, guys? How long do you think it's going to take? It's already done. It's already done. Ain't that nice? Already done. Okay, okay, okay. So what does the data look like now? So it's a TIFF, which is good, because that's lossless. Let's go into Photoshop. Let's take a look at the data. Why don't you look at that? That's a nice, very nice displacement map. Now you're like, well, where's my details in there? Well, they're there. They're just very, very, very low contrast, extremely low contrast. But because this is lossless, because this is 32-bit, it means that it doesn't matter that the detail is low contrast. As long as the detail is there, you don't have to worry about anything at all. In fact, I could take this here and just crank up the contrast on this, and you guys can see that pretty much all my height details are all there. We can use this to easily export out all these layers individually as separate height maps, which we afterward combine within Substance Painter. And that's what I've done. Let me show you guys the library of height maps that I have for this particular head. So I go in here, process. These are all my layers exported out as TIFFs. And let me show you guys just a few ones so that you see what they look like. So here's my chicken skin. My chicken skin. Here's my chicken skin, right? It's a nice gray texture. You're like, yep, that's a nice flag gray, Laura. You worked really hard on this. I know, I'm very proud of this, right? Super gray, super boring. And then we apply a level on this. And then we start seeing the magic appear. Here's our chicken skin data. 32-bit lossless, so it doesn't matter how much you compress the levels, it will always be nice and smooth. Here's another one. So we're talking about those skin pores. Here's what the data looks like for those skin pores. So these are my large skin pores. Again, there's nothing here at all. But once I crank this up, you guys can see my height map for my skin pores, my large skin pores, which I've only applied over the cheeks and a bit on the chin, as you can see. So it's there. This is a separate layer, and I have my separate data here. All right, cool. Now, at this point, you may start to have a bit of a question, which is like, how did I get this data out to be so clean there? Because, you know, from the height map we've exported before, which was this one here, right? Sure, I have all that tertiary detail in there, but I also have pretty much everything else in there too, right? I have like, not just only the layers, but I also have in here all of the, like kind of like the bump of the surface, if you see what I mean. Like I can see the nose in here. I can see all the wrinkles, everything that's been sculpted into the base mesh, essentially. Like all of that is in here. And yeah, so you're like, okay, but so what do you do with those? How do you get data that's so clean? It's like, yeah, I can see my skin pores here, but I also see everything else. So you're like, yeah, okay, so how did I get that? Well, it's actually it's simple now. It wasn't before, but I made it simple for you guys. So it wasn't that simple, but it is now. I mean, it was never really complicated, but it's a lot simpler now. You can actually do that in just a few clicks. So what we need to do is that we need to essentially extract out the data of the layer that we want from the pool of data that is in there. We need to extract and just sort of extirpate that data out of all the other tertiary details that we have. So for this to work, for me to be able to extirpate this out, I need to export 2 height maps. I need to get 2 height maps out of this. And the first one is actually what the head looks like without any of these layers. So what is the ground, the base, if you will, the base of the head that I want to have. So this is my base on which I add my tertiary details. So first of all, let's start by exporting out a displacement for this. Let me go down back. So we said about 48,000 points. That's what we want to do. Okay, so flip V 32 bits, move UVs is off. Everything is great. Resolution set to 8K. Everything is good. So let's do that then. Let's do create export map. And this is within our displace test. So this is, let's call it no details. Why don't call it no details? All right. Oh, sorry. I always forget that. There you go. So quick, right? It's so incredibly quick. Like, it's crazy. Okay, let's go back to our higher subdivision level, or highest in this case. Let's go back to our highest 50 million subdivision level mark. Let's turn on our pore layer. Let's go back down to 48K, and let's generate this again. But now let's call it pores. Export this out. Don't you wish that there was a way, you know, these kind of dialog boxes? It's like you can say yes, no, or always yes. It's like, but I want to say always no. You know, it's like most softwares, they fix this with a little checkbox that says, remember my answer to this. Kind of reminds me of those dialog boxes that's like yes or no, but if you try clicking on no, the dialog box moves like somewhere else on your screen, you know? It's as dissatisfying as that. So no, I do not want to export a base mesh, and I would really like you not to ask me the question again. But so we exported out two displacement maps. And if we take a look at the data there, then it becomes very obvious, right? So I go here, I was in displace test. This was my no details. It becomes very obvious that, you know, I have essentially no details, but I do have the basic displacement map of the face that is there. And so it's actually very simple. We just need to do a difference. Like the data that we want is actually the difference between those two textures that we have. So let me go back in here. Let me take my pore. Let me duplicate that over my no pores or no details. So it's actually very simple. What we want is simply the difference between these two textures. One has my skin pores and the other one does not. We just need a difference. That's all it is, right? So I've conveniently made myself a little action within Photoshop that does just that. And so for me, I just have to click on this here, have to say this is layer 0, this is layer 1. Yeah, just press this here, and that's it. There you go. I have my texture, which is just a height map for just my layer. And I can throw this inside Painter and use that on a layer within Painter there. So that's great, but then you're like, okay, but then, okay, so that's a lot of stuff, you know, to have to go through there. And I could share the action, but then I thought, could I also maybe share something better with you guys than just a Photoshop action? Because, you know, Photoshop kind of is a dinosaur and needs to die a little bit. So do we have something better than that? And the answer is yes, we do. I've created something even better for you guys. So in this week's handout, you guys can go and actually download that. There is in there a Substance SBSAR file that is opened with Substance Player. That's how you open SBSARs traditionally. I mean, you can open them any sorts of ways, but if you have Substance Player installed, it will open in there. Substance Player, guys, is free software, okay? Even if you don't have Substance, you can actually type in Substance Player and download that, which allows you to use substances. So you don't actually need a subscription to Substance to use any Substance materials, because you can actually download the Substance Player for free and you can use that. So that's great to know. So I conveniently have it installed, of course. Let me go to classes. We are in rendering, and here it is. So this is my little SBSAR with the little Substance Player icon. I simply load that, and you'll see it's so simple. So incredibly simple. You just go in here, and you just say input A, which in our case here in this place test is our no details. So this essentially, this little substance graph simply generates the difference between two input height maps. That's all it is. It's a very simple graph. Anyone with basic knowledge of Substance is able to do that. Substance designer there. And the other one is our pores. And so we say this is a AK texture. And if ever the data is not in the proper orientation, you can inverse the result using this here. But it's kind of hard to see because it's such low contrast. And then we simply want to export this out now. So I will export this out to, let's go back into displace test. Let's plug it in there. Let's call this, I don't know. And let's make sure to export this out as a TIFF, because if we don't, it's not going to be 32-bit and it's simply not going to work afterward. This is super important, of course. Export this out as a TIFF, and that's it. Just export this out. Close this, go in our folder. Still a great texture, but once more, let's boost the contrast on this. And we have our isolated layer data. Hey guys, as you can see, this particular workflow uses a little Substance Player graph that I have already distributed to all Outgang members there. But it's my pleasure to also make it available for all of you guys free of charge. So if you want to have access to this little Substance Player helper tool to be able to generate a difference between two height maps, and so that you're able to use this workflow without any encumbrances, visit us on outgang.studio. You simply have to go to the lecture page of this particular lecture. I will leave a link in the video description below, and you will be able to download this little Substance Player graph to help you generate a difference between two height maps and be able to use this particular workflow that we're describing right now. All right, guys, let's get back to the content. And that's it. Then you just plug all these within within Painter there. And so you like, let's just go through that, okay? Okay, so I need this head. And so this is my head where I have baked out the high res, but I have baked out the high res without any of those tertiary detail layers turned on. So this is essentially the high res, as you had seen here with all the layers turned off, but with the V2 little layer that is turned on there. So this is pretty much this that I've baked out as a high res. And the reason why I've baked this out as a high res, I have exported this out and I have baked this out using the traditional baking approach within Substance Painter there, is because the pinches were important, as we have talked about. I really wanted to have some nicely pinched wrinkles over the surface there. So that was important for me. So it was important for me to bake the base with all the wrinkles, using traditional projection baking within Painter there to really have that there. But other than that, what do we do afterward? Well, it's simple. We just go to File, we go to Import Resource, we load all our individually processed textures. All our height data is there. Let's import this to the project. Import. Go to Layers. Let's make a fill layer in here. Let's turn off everything else. Let's create a folder as well while we're there. Let's put that in there. Let's call this height. Take our fill layer, go to height, and let's just say, so this is a height map. So which one do we want? Because they're all there now. I don't know. Let's load the, well, we're talking about skin pores, but let's load the chicken skin one. There you go. This one here. Load that in there. And let's see how our data looks like. Could also be, while we are here, let's make sure to just create a base layer under everything else. And I like to put this particular one at 0.5 because I like to be able to see the height map. And where is my data? This is not working. It's not working. What is going on?
You're in the wrong material.
Am I? Oh, I'm in the ice material. That's why. Haha. Oh, thank you. I would have looked at that forever. Yeah. So here we go. We got our chicken skin in here. And then what I would do, I would go in here, add levels. Yeah. Add levels, and then same thing here. I would just crunch the values, just to get a bit more base height in there. And yeah, so now we can actually just, if this is too strong now, we can just bring the opacity back down. So we can control the opacity of this as much as we want, right? I could duplicate this. I can make masks based off of that too. That's really, really nice. Okay, I can easily start to mask things out based off of this. Okay, so do take a look at this. This is really, really cool. Now that I'm here, let's do something. Okay, guys, let's create a fill, and just as a demonstration, I won't properly texture this, but just to give you guys a very quick demonstration here, let me go to my fill, turn off all my channels. Let's put some red in there, perhaps. Let's do the same thing we've done like 15 times over the texturing class. Let's add a black mask to this. Let's add a generator. Let's select a mask editor right there. But now take a look at this. This is really, really awesome. And now what I can do is I can, from this here, I can get rid of the curvature and instead go to micro height. And in here, I can actually load the same displacement map that I have applied here. So I know this kind of disappears from the screen, but I'm essentially just looking for my same height map for the chicken skin, and I'm simply loading it in here. And so there it is. And now I can go to micro details, micro height, turn that on. And let's go to curvature now. Boost this up here a little bit. Oh yeah, the only thing though is that you can't actually use a curvature if you get rid of the curvature here. So what you have to do is load like a flat gray texture in here, which I have already exported one of these. So I'll just go in here, but you may have to create one and add one manually to your shelf there. If I just click on here, there isn't one by default, but I've just conveniently added myself a flat gray texture in here that I can use. Let's go to curvature. Let's put all these values to 0. Maybe keep the fine up. And let's boost the curvature intensity here. And take a look at that. So I'm getting that nice chicken skin to really be nice and isolated. So I can create my albedo. I can use this height map if I want to change the roughness values. This right now is, it's only in edges there. I could use only the cavities if I want to use the spacing between my chicken skin. So on and so forth, right? Super good. Super good workflow. I hope you guys like it. I hope you guys like this particular workflow and that you find this interesting and that you sort of start to really use this, because it's a really, really powerful workflow here. So yeah, and I've used that quite a lot here on my second pass on this particular head here. So as you guys can see, I still have pretty much everything we've done, but I have added myself a height folder right here. I have added on top of that my albedo folder. Here, what I have created on top of everything is a final folder using masks that reference the different height maps, as I have shown you guys, into my chicken skin. I have these little comedones here that are a bit wider there. I have my skin pores here that I have separated because I wanted to make them just a bit darker. The wrinkles, so on and so forth there. And once more, I can tweak the intensity of the height map of each of these layers individually if ever the particular flavor isn't what I want, either here or once we get to Unreal. So that's it. I hope this was interesting and that you have learned something in the process there. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you want to have access to more Outgang content, do visit us at outgang.studio to see how you can become a member and have access to all our weekly lectures on how to become a better character artist. Take care, guys.